Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Patrick Brenner here, president of the Southwest Public Policy Institute. Thank you for tuning in today for another episode of SPPI-TV. We're on episode 18, and we're here to talk today with our special guest about Airbnb, short-term rentals, and to answer the question, is Airbnb disrupting property ownership? I'm going to bring Dowd on. Dowd, Mr. Vice President, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, sir. Looking forward to this one. And I don't know the real estate business, but I know government, and I have a feeling government is going to be a villain in this story.
No way. I love those stories, though. It's so easy to pick on the government. Carl Vidal is our guest today, and I'm pleased to be joined by him. I've now bridged a couple of gaps in my professional and personal life. Carl and I go way back to when I was involved in a HIPAA risk management company in the Albuquerque area doing cybersecurity consulting and HIPAA risk management for HIPAA-covered entities in the Albuquerque area. It was like a lifetime ago. But Carl, it's really good to close the loop on that and welcome you on the show. Dowd, I'm going to hand it over to you. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. President. I didn't expect that quick jump, but we have a lot to talk about today, so let's get to it. Folks, what do Palm Springs, California, Pitkin County, Colorado, Marfa, Texas, and even Albuquerque, New Mexico have in common? Well, there are just a few of the communities that are hashing things out in regards to short-term rentals, a very disruptive industry. And those of us who believe in capitalism and love capitalism, we don't see disruptive as a bad word in any pejorative sense at all. Since apps like Vrbo and Airbnb have come to the fore and become more and more popular, I guess, maybe 10 years ago now, it's been some time, these fights have been proliferating across the country with incumbent hotels and properties looking to use government to reduce competition. You've got the NIMBY crowd. You've got neighbors who I think, at least in terms of my initial look at this the last few weeks, maybe exaggerating the extent of a problem that may not be quite as bad as they say. And homeowners, property owners, and people like our guest who are just simply trying to just pursue their entrepreneurial pursuits and dreams, make a few bucks on the short-term in the short-term rental industry, and frankly satisfy a lot of customers, because this is an industry with a lot of very, very satisfied customers and people who are interested in availing themselves of these services. And we might even get to the new app we learned about recently, which allows you to rent your swimming pool out at a time when the country's struggling with a very, very hot summer. I think a lot of people are going to be interested in that. So we're going to go to Carl, who I don't know. I met just a few minutes ago. Carl is a private sector guy from reading his resume, reading his LinkedIn page. He is from the real estate world, owns and manages Airbnb properties here in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Carl. And as I told you before the show began, I'm going to be Larry King today, just asking a lot of very dumb, open-ended questions and let you dominate this discussion. My kickoff question is, what is a short-term rental? What is this thing? I've never heard of this thing, Carl. Tell me about it.
Well, thank you very much for having me. So short-term rentals, I think in a previous lifetime were known as vacation rentals. And, one of the first platforms that allowed people to do vacation rentals was VRBO. And then, about around a decade ago, Airbnb came out and really just simplified the technology, making it available to the masses to list their home, have someone either stay with you in one of your spare rooms or list your entire home as a rental. So, every government market defines the short-term rental a little bit differently. Traditionally, people think of a short-term rental as under 30 days, but even under New Mexico state law, they did away with the under 30-day designation, and a short-term rental is now considered any fully furnished property with the intent of not renting long-term, where you also provide bedding, utensils, and basic necessities. So loosely, the government definitions, vary from district to district, but in the private sector, you are essentially taking your property that you have control over and renting it to people who want to come and stay for a set period of time.
Now, we think of when we see television commercials or web commercials about families getting together on a Verbo property or an Airbnb ad. Is there such a thing as a typical short-term renter, or does the demographic profile go all the way across?
Yeah, very interesting. You know, when I got into this back in 2016, I was expecting a lot of vacationers, and I was really off base there. On our short-term rentals, and I currently manage somewhere between 40 to 50. Um, we host everything. We host families that are coming to visit family. We host people that are in the hospital and, you know, they have to go to hospital appointments for a cardiac reason or, you know, some medical illness and they have to be nearby the hospital. So they're coming up here from Deming or Socorro or up north, you know, in some of our smaller towns, and they come stay here at one of our rentals for sometimes months to go to all their doctor appointments. We also have traveling nurses. We've got locum doctors that UNM and Presbyterian and Lovelace all bring in, the traveling doctors that we need so bad. We get a lot of contractors that are staying here for building. A lot of them are working on HVAC units, or a lot of them work out at Intel. We've got a lot of movie people in town. The movie industry, sometimes those reservations are a few days and sometimes they're 4 or 5 months long. Additionally, we get a lot of, you know, employees, you know, on contracts for anything from small business all the way up to, you know, Kirtland Air Force Base and Sandia Labs. Sometimes they're here for training. Sometimes they're here for project management. It varies greatly. But we also get a lot of people for other personal reasons like funerals and you know, things like that. You know, some of the more unfortunate events, but people that need a place to come as they attend events like a funeral. And then finally, we also get vacationers that are coming to enjoy our city, that are coming here for, you know, your typical hospitality reasons of tourism.
Sure. It's funny you mentioned traveling nurses because I have a minority ownership in a couple of golden retrievers down the road from me here in the very liberal village of Corrales, New Mexico, and the house next door was just bought by an entrepreneur, a short-term rental entrepreneur, and he's going to be renting to traveling nurses. And the homeowner I share the dogs with is very, very. She's not angry that this is going to be a short-term rental property for traveling nurses. She's very happy because, you know, what's more responsible than a nurse? You know, one more person in the neighborhood who knows healthcare and is probably going to love the dogs too. That's she's very, very pleased with that. The tech on this. This is something that was enabled by digital technology. And of course, we do hear those kind of Verbo and Airbnb, the big names. But tell us a little bit about the different types of apps. Do they appeal to different types of customers? And what are some of, is the market broad to meet, as you say, the broad range of people looking to acquire these services?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you know, the internet is endless. It can go on forever, right? But the short-term rental marketplace is dominated by a few large players. Essentially, Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, TripAdvisor, Hopper. And then, you know, after that, you get into some smaller ones like Mr. B&B and Furnish Finder and a few of the smaller players. And then regionally, you have companies like my own, you know, Irvie Homes, where we manage a group of rentals in a local marketplace. And then we have our own website where people can go and book those rentals direct and, you know, get some more local benefits.
Yeah. Talk about that because it's very interesting to me. We just initiated this research project, and our broadcast today is sort of the kickoff of a much larger investigation that we're going to be doing into this issue. Because it just, as I was saying, Palm Springs, Routt County. I was just reading last night. Routt County in Colorado. This is right from the website. Can I rent my property on a nightly basis in a residential zone district? The short answer is no. Very, very, very interesting. But one of the things I ran into looking at on the legal aspect of this was another person who seems to kind of do your kind of work, which is sort of, and in no way do I mean this in a demeaning way, but a middleman who's sort of between the direct consumer and then the the Silicon Valley app provider, where the local scene here and you have your properties that you either own or about or you manage. It seems like that's a part of the marketplace too, where someone who is within a metro area or within a state who fills that need, that sort of person in the middle, so you're not sort of going in cold, somebody who you can really trust their judgment.
Sure. Well, marketing your property it takes a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous amount of skill. If you want to successfully have a short-term rental, anybody can take some pictures and throw up, some descriptions of the house and they can rent it. But to really stand out and to go to the top of the list where your houses are rented on a frequent basis, to have your pricing correct and the marketing, there are a lot of people like myself who make a living off of being that middleman and using our skills. I've got a marketing degree from the University of New Mexico, and I use those marketing skills every single day to help my property owners who I represent on their properties to book their rentals. And then I use those skills to match up guests who want to come stay at great rentals that are well managed. So there is definitely a market for that, and there are people, I think, in every marketplace across the country that do that. As you saw in my opening intro, I am also a realtor. I am with R1 Property Management, and I team together with R1 Property Management, where they actually provide even more services of maintenance and inspections and overseeing cleaners and things of that nature. So there is a lot of going on, and there's some great companies in town besides myself who provide these services as well.
Sure, I'm sure that's true in all our southwestern communities. We have done we've done the pitch for this industry, and as a supporter of competition and capitalism, I don't really see many downsides. But the sad truth is, a lot of people. Well, I don't know if I'd say a lot, but there are people who are sort of the enemies of this industry, and everything from the people who own big hotel properties who are, they're not happy that they have competition, to people in neighborhoods who think that this is, imposes all sorts of nuisance problems. Let's give these people their due. Let's acknowledge some of these complaints, some of the most common complaints, Carl, and sort of lay out piece by piece why we don't think that those are really valid complaints.
Sure. Well, we can start with the hotel industry. I come from a family that owned many hotels. My father owned the El Rancho and the Ramada Inn in Gallup, New Mexico. So I'm very familiar with the hotel industry, and they've invested a lot of money and effort into their hotels. Without a doubt, you can go buy a hotel. If you have $2 million, you can go get in the hotel industry and you can provide places to stay. And I think anybody that's invested $2 million wants to protect that investment. Without a doubt, short-term rentals are competitive against hotel industry. And, as a result, hotels have been charging lower rates. They've had lower occupancy because people are given a choice. One of the great things, and I would argue the greatest part of America is our embrace of competition. We make it where anybody can compete. And that's the beauty. If you have a good idea or a good product, you can put that product on the market and you can draw in customers that leads to, revenue that hopefully leads to profit if you're managing your expenses right. And that is one of the best things about this country. I think there is a clear trend across the country. Even Dallas, Texas, just a couple of weeks ago announced they're banning short-term rentals, which is interesting because Texas actually has a state law that makes it impossible for a city to ban rentals. So interesting. They'll battle that out in court, I'm sure, right?
Lawyers will get a lot of billable hours for that fight.
Yes, yeah, they'll figure that out, But I think I just find it, across the country, it's in the hotel group's best interest if they can have short-term rentals limited in competition. Then they can raise rates, they can enjoy higher occupancy because there'll be less competition on the marketplace.
Sure, sure. And the neighbors. One of the things that I just don't find all that convincing when the neighbors get angry about these properties uh, is, as far as I know, all of the local ordinances, whether you're renting a property or you're owning the property and living there, all the local ordinances, all the state law still applies to what's going on that property. So if someone's throwing a noisy party, does it really matter whether it's someone renting that property or a person owning that property? I mean, if you have a problem neighbor, that problem neighbor could be there for years, if not decades. If you're talking to short-term rental people, they're actually going to leave. So I don't, the complaints about people coming and going. People come and go in their own homes. If your neighbor is, a mother and a father working and have a bunch of kids, there's going to be a lot of people coming and going. There might be noise. I just don't. I struggle with that sort of NIMBY neighbor rebellion against this because I just don't see it as very valid.
Well, I can tell you this. When I launch a short-term rental, one of the first things I do is talk to my neighbors. And everybody is concerned because they don't know what it is. You hear, the news stories and things like that, and they're like, oh, I don't know if I want that. And I talk to them, I give them my business card, and we develop a relationship. And I have great relationships with all my neighbors at the homes that I own. And if anything goes wrong, they know who to call, and I can go take care of it immediately. Um, you know, I think a lot of people have had the experience of a long-term rental where you get a bad tenant at a long-term rental. And whether it's drug use or violence or, various things, one of the hardest things is when you get a very bad neighbor that is a tenant, it's very hard to get rid of them. And the beauty of a short-term rental, on the off chance that we get a bad guest, which is extremely rare, but on the off chance that you get a bad guest, they're gone in a couple of days. They're no longer an issue because they were only there for a few days. Versus if you're living next to someone who's a bad, tenant, and it could be 6 months to a year, you're living next to, a very bad situation. So, one of the things in there, and I can tell you, my neighbors, they love me, and we really respect the heck out of them. I couldn't even imagine being a bad neighbor. We want to be part of our community and we want to contribute to the community and we want to raise the values of all the homeowners so everybody's happy. And I don't want anybody disturbed in any way, shape, or form. If I ever have a guest that's being too loud, they're going to get a phone call within minutes, to have them straighten up, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. I could just, we are a policy research organization. We investigate data and policy, so we try to stay away from anecdotes. But to back up your story about meeting your neighbors, a couple weekends ago, when that property next to where my dogs live was bought, the owner came by. I was in the front with the dogs, and the homeowner was in the back of the house. And he said, "Oh, I'm your new neighbor, and I just want to introduce myself," and just gave his contact information and said, "Any problem, you contact me immediately. I'm immediately reachable." I think a lot of those conversations have been are taking place all the time in a lot of these short-term communities, but vetting the customer, Carl, is interesting to me because I think it was the other day. I very rarely leave my computer or my dogs, but on occasion, if I have to go to the airport, I will do a ride-hailing service. And I think one of them, I had a long conversation with the driver, and I got some notification on some app saying that, oh, the driver rated you very, very highly as a customer. And I thought, oh, well, that's nice. How are these customers of these services? Are they vetted somehow? Do they get ratings from the providers, or are they held accountable? I mean, if they establish a history of being a problem renter, is there a permanent record for that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So every OTA platform is a little different, and the OTAs would be Airbnb, VRBO, and things of that nature, or companies of that nature. So they all have different processes. Airbnb's got one of the best processes. They do background checks on people for criminal history. They also verify IDs and they match them up with selfies. And, they're really trying to make sure that, we're dealing with good people. Now, additionally, like for Irvie Homes, right, we do verification checks. Every guest that checks in, we're getting an ID. We are matching it up to who they are. We're running some basic verifications, on some background stuff. And, we're trying to make sure we're renting to good people who are going to be a good neighbor and a good guest at the house. Now, one of the other things, with that is we have the reviews. So if you get a bad guest, you are given the opportunity to leave a review for that guest. And, so for example, if I have a bad guest that comes to the house and they're loud and obnoxious or anything like that, I'm going to notate that in this review and say, I personally would not rent to this guest again. I encountered these issues. When that guest goes to rent again from the next host, their review is going to pop up, and then that host is going to be able to make a decision on if they want to, host that guest. And then anybody that commits an egregious act, like throwing a party or damaging a house severely, the OTAs are just going to ban them outright and make it where they can't rent anymore. So, at least on that platform, right? So there is a lot of protections in that. And you do build up a history where hosts can look at it and say, is this person credible? Are they serious? And will they be a good guest?
Sure. Folks, we are talking to Carl Vidal. He is with Irvie Homes. Go to irviehomes.com online. Carl, are all your properties in Greater Albuquerque? Are you focused in that area?
So for the majority, our houses are in the Albuquerque metro. We do currently have one home in Santa Fe, and we're expanding out that direction. I think there is a bit of a mentality in my company that we need to expand to other marketplaces as well, just with some of the uncertainty that the city has caused with the legislation they're proposing.
Yeah, we're going to get into that, folks. We're going to get on the regulatory side on the back half of this program, and maybe we'll go for a whole couple more hours. But again, Carl's with irviehomes.com. Check it out. Come to New Mexico. You will never hear me say anything good about New Mexico government, but you will constantly hear me say good things, and I actually chose to live here. You will constantly hear me say good things about New Mexico's weather and food and history and culture and scenery. There's so many amazing things about the land of enchantment, and if we could just kind of turn things around and on the tax and regulatory side and the welfare dependency side, we'd probably supercharge this state and we'd be as dynamic as many of our other states in the Southwest. Whatever platform you're watching or listening, send your comments, send your questions to Carl and me and Patrick. We will try to answer them. Keep it clean. As always, ladies and gentlemen, you are watching SPPI-TV, and we're talking short-term rentals, a really interesting topic. I personally haven't done it yet, but I'm thinking about I happen to live personally next to the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta, the park where that is held every year. And I'm right across the road. And it's not a great place to live when hundreds of thousands of people are coming into the Duke City. And I'm actually looking at doing this for the first time down in my beloved Ruidoso, New Mexico, and going on one of the rental apps there to see what's available down in October, because you don't want to live across from Balloon Fiesta Park when the Balloon Fiesta is underway. It's very, very hard. You feel like you're trapped in some sort of labor camp somewhere and you can't leave your home. It's I know it brings a lot of money into the city, but for those of us who live in the neighborhood, it's not so much fun. Again, Carl, check him out at irviehomes.com and come visit us in the land of enchantment. Now, Carl, you, as a private sector guy, have to get up and be accountable every day to your customers, and you've got to bring a buck in or two to support you and your lovely family. One of the biggest impediments, one of the biggest headaches that people in your line of work, particularly in regard to our subject today, short-term rentals, one of the biggest impediments out there is government regulation. And whether it's the origin of that is coming from government itself, or whether it's what's called rent seeking. In the economics profession, it's called rent seeking, where an individual actor or business or industry in the private sector tries to use the levers and the knobs of government to extract benefits from regulations and law and taxes that hurt the competition and help them. Whatever the origin, government has been interested in the short-term rental industry for some time. And boy, these fights, coast to coast, and of course here in the Southwest, New York City actually, I don't know if it's still the law, but they actually were banning people from advertising short-term rentals. There was some sort of First Amendment lawsuit threatened or filed against New York City. There's been all sorts of zoning regulations. There's been caps on the number of people who can apply for and get permits to rent these properties. I mean, these regulations have been manifesting themselves in all sorts of different ways. Here in Albuquerque, the Duke City, one of the scariest things you can ever hear, ladies and gentlemen, is that a task force is being appointed to look into a question. And that's what happened in Albuquerque a number of years ago. That task force came up with a big document, made a number of suggestions for regulations, and those regulations were eventually adopted. Talk about our little city here of 562,000 people, Carl. How did the city of Albuquerque approach short-term rentals? How did that, just the last couple of years of looking at regulations, then eventually adopting regulations, and then we'll look at the reality of how those regulations are being implemented?
Yeah, absolutely. And then beyond that, we can talk about the new regulations that are being proposed as a vote next month. So around 2020, Diane Gibson, who was the counselor at the time, created a task force to look at short-term rentals. And one of the things that the city wanted to start regulating is how the registration process was working for short-term rentals. Now, what's interesting is if you have a long-term rental, there is no regulation whatsoever. Other than real estate laws from the state of New Mexico, which anytime you are renting a property, you're going to be subject to the real estate laws of that state. But the city took it, upon themselves to enact a registration process to, essentially have the short-term rentals register and then file monthly reports, agree to be a good neighbor. They put in occupancy limits and some things like that. So, it wasn't terrible legislation. There are definitely some things I could discuss that we don't love about the regulation that they passed, but by and large, it wasn't awful. And one of the things that Councilor Gibson, who is no longer the counselor, but one of the things that she promised at the time is we're not trying to shut down vacation rentals. We don't want to cap them. We're in favor of them. We just want to make sure we're collecting taxes on the short-term rentals, and we want to make sure that people are safe and that we're not over-occupying properties. So that bill passed, I want to say either in late 2020 or 2021, and they gave everybody 6 months to get registered as a short-term rental.
Yeah, let me just give you the data. I'm just on the city website, so people can't accuse me of misrepresenting. The short-term rental bill, the ordinance 02030, passed the city council meeting October 5th, 2020, published October 23rd. The ordinance went into effect April 23rd, 2021.
Thank you. Yeah, my memory was pretty good. I can remember the exact months. So, with the really the legislation that's in effect, the city mandates that you have to be a good neighbor, that you have to have insurance for your property, you have to submit floor plans of your property and tell them, the exact dimensions of the house and the square footage, and it has to be to scale, professional, basically blueprints. You have to also do the occupancy limit. They allow 2 people per bedroom so 2 people per bedroom that you have. If you're in a 1-bedroom, you're allowed 2, but for houses that are larger, 2, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms, you're allowed 2 people per bedroom plus an additional 2 on the, say, pull-out sofa. So a 1-bedroom has an occupancy limit of 2 people. A 2-bedroom can go 4. 3-bedroom can go 8. A 4-bedroom can go 10. And it was real interesting. Clearly, in my opinion, the hotel lobby was behind the 2 persons for a 1-bedroom because that's their biggest competition. You're allowed to put 4 people in a hotel room, but if you have a 1-bedroom apartment, and for example, I have a 1,350 square foot apartment downtown. It's 1 bedroom. I'm only allowed 2 people there.
Wow.
Despite the fact that we could easily have a pull-out sofa and sleep 4. But you know, the city mandates that we only have 2 on that 1 bedroom. A little silly, and clearly, you know, I think our competition put that in that bill.
Well, you know, the other one that I may be jumping ahead a little bit, when I was looking at the regs last night, the one that really just flusters me, limit gatherings to 2 times the maximum overnight occupancy, but no more than 20. It seems to me, you know, that's kind of arbitrary, particularly for if it's a large property. I mean, some people do rent 1-bedrooms out, but if you're talking about a nice spread here in New Mexico where there's a lot of land and there's, you know, there is some wealth where people might want to rent out a large home with large property, no more than 20. That seems to be real. In the Army, they'd call it chicken something.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that you can't do 21. I mean, what, in a big property, what's wrong with 21 people?
Well, no, I think there might be a little misconception there. And really, this is probably the only part of the bill that I kind of liked.
Oh.
And what they're dealing with is if you have an event.
Okay.
All right. So there was a house over by the Four Hills area in Albuquerque. And the owner of this house essentially had a giant house with a pool, concrete floors. They had no carpet. They turned it into a party house, and they were hosting events for, you know, 100 people at a time. It was a wreck on the neighborhood, and they were being extremely disruptive, right? And the city already has lots of laws, nuisance laws and party laws and noise laws that they could have used to, you know, attack that problem. But one of the things they did put in the legislation here is for sleeping arrangements, you're only allowed to have the occupancy limit I spoke of. And then if you have people visit for an event, let's say a family gathering, they go double that. So if you have a 3-bedroom house, you're allowed to have 8 people spend the night, but you can have a total of 16 people at the property in total for like a dinner party or something. And I'm not against that. We don't want to be having weddings in a residential area where 200 people show up at a 3-bedroom property. You know, it's just not conducive to a good neighborhood. So I understood the city's thinking on that. My only issue is the limit of only 2 people for a 1-bedroom. I think that should have been 4. That was the only challenge I saw. But does that kind of make sense how they're wording that for the total limit?
Well, I think it also makes sense that the you know, I fight collectivists and Marxists for a living. The constant rap on entrepreneurs and business people is they are lockstep opposed to regulation, and they're all free market people, and you know, they want this anarchical world. It seems to me a lot of businesses that I've observed over 30 years in policy analysis are welcome reasonable regulation as long as it's sort of consistent and it makes sense to them. That they don't like, you know, crazy regulation that hurts jobs and, you know, hurts opportunity and hurts their bottom line and their viability to be in a business. So it's not surprising, folks, for me to hear our guest say that he's comfortable with a number of those regulations. Another one that I was looking at is multiple properties. Do I need multiple user accounts? No, you can combine multiple permits onto one user account. However, you do need a permit for each property unit. You need an STR permit for each unit you are renting, even if they are in the same location. Your thoughts on that, Carl?
Yeah, so it's real interesting on the permitting process, and it is a bit of a mess with the city. And so they passed this legislation back in 2021, as we discussed, and as of when they went into effect with proposing a cap that's coming up, there were only about, I want to say the city said 300 rentals that had registered. The other 2,200 rentals had not registered with the city. Part of the reason that I think a lot of people haven't registered is it is extremely difficult to register your short-term rental. It is not an easy thing. It can take a month under good circumstances to get the CRS number, to get the floor plan created by a professional. They won't take even a appraisal. If you take the floor plan out of your appraisal, the city won't accept that. They said it's not good enough. So they reject a lot of common sense documents that clearly meet the standard of bank loans and all of that, but they won't accept it for the city. So they're actively, I think, pushing back, trying to dissuade people from registering. There's some additional issues with permitting. So the first year that I registered, every single one of my properties is under an LLC. And each one of my LLCs has a business license, and that business license is out of my home office because I conduct business out of my home office. The property itself, the rental property, is a product, if you will. I collect rent and I do the marketing as a property manager out of my home. My product that I sell is the rental. And wherever that exists, right? I've got a few across the city. So I had a license for each, a city business license for each rental property, and then I have a permit for each business license. So when I went to register this year, the city rejected my renewal. I was already registered. I just submitted my renewal, and the city rejected it, and they said, your floor plan is not good enough. And I said, well, you accepted the floor plan last year. What's the change? And I have very detailed floor plans. They're 10 pages long. And I don't think they ever went past page 1. They were a bit confused by it. I'm not too sure, but they said, this isn't good enough. I said, okay, well, what do you want to see? Got that hatched out. And then they said, okay, your business licenses are no good. You've got to purchase new business licenses. I said, what do you mean I've got to purchase new business licenses? I just paid you for business licenses, I got 4 business licenses. I just paid you 4 business licenses. And they said, your address is no good. You're putting your home address where you live on the business license. I said, yeah, that's correct. This is where I conduct business. And they said, we want the business license to be under the rental address. And I said, okay, I don't want to waste time here. Let's just change the city business licenses. And they said, we can't change them. You have to purchase all new licenses. And I lost my temper a little bit.
Well justified.
So, yeah, I did not like being told that I had to spend more money. So I fired off a letter to our city councilors, saying this is kind of crazy. They got involved and, I think just reached out to the director of that department and said, you need to take a look at this. He and I got on a call, we discussed it, and they worked with me to amend the address. But I still have an issue with this. We've got all the hosts that are going by the law and doing business the correct way. And all of them have a business license and a permit. And the city is saying you now have to transfer the license, to the rental address and get a new license. Here's the issue, and I'm going to give you an example. One of the largest property managers here in town, Rhino Realty, amazing company. They do great stuff, right? And they've got hundreds to thousands of rentals across the city that they rent the properties for. They have one business license. They operate on one business license out of their home office, and then they rent the 2,000 properties, out there. The city does not require a property manager like that to go get 2,000 separate business licenses for each rental. It's a bit, it's a terrible way to look at it, and I think they're being extremely unfair to short-term rentals, and I think part of the reason they're being unfair is, they want to, limit the number of rentals, and the mayor has been very clear that they want to limit the rentals, and we can do that.
Yeah, we're going to come back to Albuquerque, but we're going to take a quick detour up to Santa Fe, which we planned this interview a couple of weeks ago, folks. We didn't know that there would be a brand new lawsuit over this issue dropping against the county of Santa Fe, not the city, although I have many comments I could make about the government in the city of Santa Fe. But I want to get Carl's take on this. I've requested the PDF of the complaint from the attorney, but New Mexico being New Mexico, I haven't heard back from anyone. But anyway, in organization, grassroots organizations come together called the STR Fellowship of Santa Fe County. They are suing under federal in the federal courts against the county's ordinance that was, I guess, passed last October 2022 against short-term property owners. Their argument is that the rules that are being applied to the short-term properties aren't being applied to the bigger long-term rentals, something that Carl mentioned earlier. And I do think these are very interesting arguments in terms of having a disparate impact on the type of entrepreneur. I'm just going to throw a couple of the issues at Carl and see what he thinks. Mandatory notification of neighbors, maximum occupancy limits for dwellings, and different licenses for owners based on whether they reside on the property or not. We discussed a little bit about the occupancy issue in Albuquerque, and Carl's talked about notifying the neighbors. So let's focus on that, different licenses for owners based on whether they reside on the property. Have you seen that manifested in your experience so far, Carl?
I apologize. I was just glancing at my notes from Santa Fe's lawsuit. Can you repeat that question for me?
Oh yeah, I was looking at the three of the complaints. I don't have a copy of the actual complaint itself. Who knows? It's probably dozens or hundreds of pages long. Three of the items that were listed in one of the media accounts was, in terms of disparate impact on short-term renters, mandatory notification of neighbors, which we talked to Carl earlier about how eager these entrepreneurs are to actually talk to the neighbors in terms of mandatory. I mean, that seems sort of silly. The occupancy limits, which we've also talked to Carl about, but different licenses for owners based on whether they reside on the property. This is something that New York City. I was looking at New York City's regulations. No more than 2 people are hosted. The host has to reside in the dwelling unit that's rented in New York City. That seems a odd and potential problem, and basically a kind of a fairness issue. Do the people who own those big hotels in Santa Fe, do they live in the hotels themselves,
Yeah.
Carl? Or
Very, very few of them.
I imagine, yeah. So is the thinking there that we want the property? I mean, not to defend this, but is the thinking we want the property owner on there so that he or she is available 24/7 in case there's a problem?
Yeah, I think a little bit of it has to do with that. I think a lot of it also is trying to be restrictive to people who own a second home. They are essentially saying, okay, if you live at the property, you can rent out a bedroom, right? But if you live out of town and you don't live here and that's not your primary residence, we're not going to allow you to generate revenue off of this home. In which case you end up with a house that's just vacant. I don't know the statistics on Santa Fe, but someone from the Albuquerque city meeting said that there's 16,000 unoccupied houses in Albuquerque.
Wow.
A lot of those are owned by people who live here part-time, but they're unoccupied the rest of the time.
Interesting. We're talking to Carl Vidal. Visit his website, irviehomes.com, IRVIEHOMES. If you're listening to just the audio, if you're watching the video, you can see it pop up on the screen. Carl is an entrepreneur in the greater Albuquerque area, and we're talking about short-term rentals. We've got a few minutes left, so if you want to get your questions and comments in, please do that. We went up to Santa Fe briefly. We're coming back south down I-25 to Albuquerque. A community, Carl, that you say, I'm horrified by this, they're the leaders, let's put that in air quotes, the leaders are looking at a potential cap on the number of short-term rentals in the Duke City?
Yeah, well, they've got a new legislation package that is being sponsored by Councilor Feeblecorn and Ike Benton. And essentially, what it's going to do is it is going to cap the total number of rentals. They set at 1,200, then they later looked at an amendment of 1,800. They haven't quite defined it yet. They want to limit the rentals to no more than 3 rentals per person. They want to mandate that you have a local person that is in charge of the rental. So, for example, if you live in Oklahoma City and you have a second home in Albuquerque, you're not allowed to rent that home yourself. They want you to hire someone local. And a bunch of other extremely restrictive items in there. And we do have a impact study that we can probably pull up here that is for the economic impact in Albuquerque. And this study was commissioned at the beginning of the year. Initially, I went to the city to do this impact study in 2022, and I went to the economic development branch of the city government, and I said, "Hey, I know you guys are looking at short-term rentals. Can we look at the economics of it and kind of see what's going on there?" And they said, "Absolutely not. We're not going to help with that because it's our intention to ban them." I was a little dejected, right? So I went and talked to UNM. They've got it's not just UNM, but there is a group that kind of does business quasi with UNM. They wanted $20,000 for the economic study. Then I worked with some people at the county, and they were actually very helpful to me in guiding me with what we should be looking at. We then took all the data that was delivered from the state of New Mexico. They have a tourism department, and they released a 2021 tourism economic impact. And we took that data, multiplied it out by all the data we know on short-term rentals, and we got this study. So in total in Albuquerque, there are just short of 2,300 jobs that are created from short-term rentals. As a group, we hosted 431,000 guests in 2022. The average spend for those guests was $361 per night. We generated $40 million in reservations just for the hosts, the homeowners or the people subleasing these. Got $40 million in rent for the homeowners, if you will. Total economic impact for the region, when you look at tourism, was $216 million. Now, I want to notate that makes us 10% of the tourism in the city of Albuquerque.
Wow.
A huge number. We're 10%. And it's not just one company. This is split between 2,500 different hosts. So it's huge, right? And then we're also bringing tourists here and other people here. They're buying gasoline, they're shopping at grocery stores, they're going to movies, they're going to restaurants, they're going to museums, they're doing all this stuff in our community and spending money. So total taxes generated was $14 million. And then the average listings on market over the past year is 2,230. The new numbers actually just came out this week for Q2. There's currently 2,493 rentals in the Albuquerque metro. But back in 22, when this was, compiled, one of the most interesting things here is of those rentals, almost 1,500 of them are part-time rentals. They are not full-time short-term rentals. And what this means is you have people, and there's various things, like some people like yourself, you're considering going to Ruidoso for Balloon Fiesta. We have hundreds of people in this city that will rent their home out for Balloon Fiesta.
Yep.
And leave town, they can make, anywhere from like $2,000 to $15,000 for the week.
People tell me to do it all the time.
Absolutely. And we do have a lot of people across the city who will generate that income for that 1 week. We also have people that'll rent it out for Thanksgiving and Christmas. They're going home for the holidays. But another part of this population that doesn't really get mentioned is you have a lot of single people that own homes, and they will rent their property out on a part-time basis just to pay their mortgage and get by.
Sure.
So, for example, if you have two people dating, right? They can go stay at either one of their houses, and one of them will rent their house as a short-term rental. And then if the house rents, they will go to their significant other's house, spend the night over there, and make money on their short-term rental. And this is how they're able to afford paying for their mortgage. So, that data is readily available. It's on airdna.co, which is one of the top, data specialists in short-term rentals. And in 2022, we only had 758 full-time rentals. Now, our city, they don't care whether you're renting part-time or full-time. If you rent 2 weeks for the year, or you rent it out just for Balloon Fiesta, they want you to go through the month-long procedure of getting a permit so you can rent it out for that 1 week. And I think another thing to note here, the full-time rentals that are here, we represent 0.00321% of housing inventory. And that's in the Albuquerque metro, and that's versus the census, the U.S. Census Bureau, right?
Sure. And that's important because some of the opponents of the industry say, oh, part of the affordable housing problem is so much of this is gobbled up in short-term rentals. Your data suggests that's a very hollow argument, at least in Albuquerque.
Oh, absolutely. We do not have a widespread problem of short-term rentals gobbling up inventory in the New Mexico area. All right.
That's great. That's great data, Carl. And we are just running desperately low on time. We could easily do another hour on this, and we're probably going to have Carl back. And I'm going to be counting on Carl as we do our deep dive, our policy analysis of this in the months to come. Carl, IrvieHomes.com is how people can learn more about what you do. But I want to kind of ask a very Larry King open-ended question, kind of at the end here. And what really struck me more than anything else, has been so much great information in the last hour, but what I think was registered in the back of my brain, what still remains at 50 years old, is your comment about the range of people who avail themselves of short-term rentals and sometimes often called vacation rentals. But what you said was about traveling to come to a funeral. And that was really interesting to me. The idea that a community, particularly a very high cost community like Santa Fe, and we have a lot of very tony resort towns all through the American Southwest, the idea that someone can come and rent an affordable property for a family event, a funeral might be more of a downer, but it could be a family reunion or something like that. The idea that short-term rentals, that the role they play in sort of facilitating bringing more people into the community, and where you can really tout your community and more people can be aware of all the wonderful things that are going on in your community, and that competition that is in the people who come into that community wouldn't maybe normally be able to come in due to the high cost. I guess I'm thinking more of some of these more tonier communities, but even any metro region. Short-term rentals, they really facilitate more people coming into and learning about your region, and I don't see a downside there. I'm thinking more of the sort of intangibles here, and we're, your analysis is wonderful, and economic analysis is always important. But the intangible side of bringing more people into your community, getting more people interested in your community and curious about where their neighborhood or the city where they're staying, that it seems to me that's enormously valuable for a place like Albuquerque or Santa Fe.
Absolutely. I went to Taos last weekend, and hotels ranged all the way up to $500.
Sure.
It's extremely expensive. Even here in Albuquerque, we've got hotels that go up to that range. Vacation rentals or short-term rentals are a middle-class investment vehicle. It is a way for people to take an asset they own, rent it out, and generate additional streams of income. And it's a way for guests to go stay actually in a community, experience the community in its natural, call it habitat, if you will, versus just being in a hotel room where all you see is the front desk, the pool, and that typical hotel tourism. With this, you're actually part of the community. You're eating at the restaurants in that area, not just the downtown area, that you would typically see, with that. So for me, it's one of the most concerning things. If the city does pass this cap next month, I have my vacation rentals in Albuquerque, right? I've got my 4 registered houses, and I will be grandfathered in according to their law. It is not going to hurt me personally if they pass this cap. It is going to hurt our future generations of New Mexicans because they will no longer be able to get a permit to do a short-term rental.
Right.
And that's just devastating. You're basically, if you want to go participate in tourism and open a hotel, you need $2 million cash minimum. Mm-hmm. And there's not even hotels for sale. They're all owned by wealthy top 1% people. So, a lot of this, the city's trying to help the poor and middle class, but you're extremely harming them by passing this policy, because I don't have $2 million to go own a hotel, and 99% of people do not. But you can take your asset that you own, you can, on your home, you can rent it to other people, and you can generate additional income for your life to pay for your kid to go to college, to put extra gas in the car, to pay your mortgage. These are all things you can do by renting your home as a short-term rental. And I really, really hope that the city council doesn't vote to pass this law next week. We currently have 4 city councilors that are supporting us. There's 2 that are definitively voting for this legislation, and there's 3 unknown councilors where we're not too sure what they're going to do. And I really, really hope they, do not pass legislation that is going to harm small business. Not to mention, if a cap of 1,800 is put in place and we have 2,500 rentals, they're going to put 700 people out of business, which would just be awful. So
I know that's the New Mexico way, ladies and gentlemen, for politicians, but some of us are trying to change that. Carl, very quickly, in addition to your business itself, if people want to help you in this effort and raise awareness of this, can they reach you directly?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to reach out. My contact information is on the website. The best way to get a hold of me probably would be the info@irviehomes.com. And I do have a team that I work with to help field questions. But the biggest thing people can really do, I think there's 2 right now. One is contact your city councilors here in Albuquerque. Let them know. I want to have opportunity for future New Mexicans to generate extra money and to do with their property what they would like to generate money. The second thing is the group out of Santa Fe. They actually have a GoFundMe for that lawsuit. And they're collecting funds. We've donated a little bit to them to help them out in Santa Fe. But that GoFundMe, it's under Santa Fe County STR supporters. Mm-hmm. And the lead attorney is Stephen Domas. So if someone wanted to, donate, that is a great place to do it. We're really hoping that Santa Fe is going to set a bit of a precedent here to help protect all of us, from undue regulation. I'm looking at the numbers right now. They've raised $49,905 of the $75,000.
Not bad.
So I'll share this link over to you guys where you guys can post it as well.
Great.
That way, if someone wants to, here, let me put it in the chat. I don't know if you can put it up, but here's the link on that people can.
Oh, Patrick's already on it. That's
okay. There you go.
Yeah. Yep.
So he put it up. Yeah, that'd be really a nice way to help. We're just trying to protect small businesses here and, give them a right to take their property and make a little bit of extra money.
Great. Thank you, Carl, so much for joining us today. And again, irviehomes.com if you want to contact Carl directly on our whatever platform you're watching on. We put up the link to the GoFundMe for Santa Fe. Folks, this is something the Southwest Public Policy Institute is, we're going to be on this like flies on you know what, because this is a serious issue for people who in our part of the country who are simply trying to pursue entrepreneurship, make a few bucks, retain their homes, and encourage people to come to our region. So the work of Carl and many more people like him, I think is really, really vital to maintaining our vibrancy as a region. And that's kind of why the Southwest Public Policy Institute exists. Southwestpolicy.com. Check us out, folks. Read our materials. Maybe kick us a few bucks for a tax-deductible donation. And we will be back next Friday. We're going on the road next week. We're going to be in San Diego, and we're hoping to do a live broadcast from San Diego, which would be very, very, very interesting. Patrick and I we're going on a long road trip, and it's going to be really fun through the hot New Mexico, Arizona, and California deserts. But thank you for joining us. We will be back, of course. This was SPPI-TV episode 18, and we, as always, thank you for tuning in, and we thank you for your support.